Well, welcome everybody to our OSOW Roundtable on February 4th. Just a little pleasantries going on there between Mr. Morgan and Randy Starnes, two longtime veterans of this roundtable and such. Happy to have you all here. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I use my radio voice now, Randy, now that we're recording this on YouTube. You want the weather forecast? No. All right, let's get right into it. This week, invited, and I want to do more of this with oversized, overweight professional drivers. We don't hear enough from you folks. It's hard for you all to join our roundtable because of the nature of your jobs, but you guys obviously are the backbone of this industry. So we're gonna keep inviting you guys throughout the year because we want to hear what you have to say. So let's do a little roll call here. I know Daniel Kinsman is here, right, Daniel?
I am.
Why don't you introduce yourself real quickly?
So I'm Daniel Kinsman. I was introduced to the industry at 7 years old. I was put in a truck, homeschooled, and since then I've been around the industry most of my life. I did heavy haul, starting from little agricultural stuff at Hunt Transportation out of Omaha, Nebraska, and I've worked all the way up to 19 axle stuff for Miller Transfer. Currently, I'm local while I am pursuing a degree in mechanical engineering. So I do local hazmat around Cleveland and Pittsburgh area and go to school when I'm not driving.
Yeah, Daniel and I had quite a conversation the other day, and he's a brilliant man, and he's going to be off inventing things that with our industry and all. So we'll have you back later, Daniel, in a year to talk specifically about the tech projects that you've got going on in your mind. How about my good friend Andy Freeman? He texted me this morning. He's a big OSOW Landstar driver. Wasn't sure whether he is going to make it or not. Okay. How about Raymond Bailey?
Yes, sir. My name is Raymond Bailey. I work for Peterson Transportation. We're based out of Manson, Iowa. We do a lot of steel stuff, but due to my proximity to some of the larger items, I do some heavier stuff as well. Mostly the most impressive things that we probably run are we do overhead crane girders and systems for various facilities that get pretty tall and really long. So that's always a good challenge. And I heard somebody mention Miller. Miller also pulls some of the larger stuff that we cannot pull. So it's interesting.
All right. Thank you, Raymond. And how about Crystal Miller? Was Crystal able to join us? Okay. Well, Crystal, as Daniel and I were just talking about, she's got a YouTube channel that I'm anxious to check out, that Daniel just confirmed is primarily from a driver and an owner's perspective, OSOW related. So I'm trying to grow our industry a little bit in terms of us getting our message out there through all these new social media systems. And then finally, a little bit later, very special guest. He's going to join us in the drivers towards the end of our roundtable. And then for those of you that I hopefully can stick around for our Bible study, he's going to do a devotional for us. He is a Pastor John Newberry of the Bennett family of companies. He is the chaplain. You might have heard David Lowery reference him. He's a wonderful guy. And he's actually going to join us from time to time throughout this year and provide our Bible study devotional. But you guys will get a kick out of him. All right. And if Crystal or Andy Freeman join us a little bit later, please, if somebody sees them, have them jump on. So Daniel and Raymond, we are not even going to come close to getting everything I emailed you guys about, but all the more reason to have you guys back a few times off and on throughout the year. So we'll just get through what we can. So we always start off, Raymond and Daniel, with a little bit of news notes from around our industry. And this is a story we've been following, and Just within the last day, you might have seen the president officially sign off on this new bill, which now means it is official. The feds are going to put up $200 million to truck parking, which is a good start.
Ooh, yeah.
And I also always like to put up here specific to our industry. ProMiles continues to work hand in hand with the Virginia Tech Transport Institute, who is continuing with their study of the first ever study on OSOW specific truck parking. So we'll have those folks on a little bit later in the year to share the results of their study. But real quick, Daniel and Raymond, your thoughts from a driver's perspective on the state of truck parking, particularly OSOW these days, the good, the bad, the ugly. Daniel?
I would say the state of it right now is East Coast is really difficult, really bad. You get out west of the Mississippi, you got more room. Not as easy, but a lot easier to find parking. Virginia has a absolute no oversize allowed in in their way stations for overnight parking, and a lot of the truck stops in Virginia do not want oversized to stay in their parking lots overnight. Granted, I was doing the 16 wide 180 200 foot long stuff, so we take up a lot of parking as it is. But some of those loads were nuclear, and having a way station that is a safe haven till you get out of our way station, we don't care, it's not our problem. It's that's an issue. So that's where I'd say it is.
Yeah. I'll add this footnote, Daniel, and anybody else on the call jump in. The manager of the Virginia Permit Office, Brandy, has been wonderful to work with from our industry standpoint in recent years. And I want to say she's actually made some inroads, or is attempting to help facilitate some better coordination with truck parking there. Anybody else? I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but anybody else on the call have some insight on Virginia permitting and specifically truck parking? Okay, that's okay. Raymond, your thoughts on OSOW truck parking nationwide these days?
I have to agree with what was said earlier in the fact that the East Coast is extremely difficult. And while the stuff that I experience pulling isn't quite as long as but what makes Virginia even a lot more challenging is we can't even go into rest areas without fear of being towed. So, and you can't use the wayside, you can't use the oasis stations that are there. So finding a way to get off the road safely and still get your load delivered in time, it is a big challenge, especially when working with a lot of job sites. So being able to get that load delivered on time to a job site, it's critical because you're holding up a team of people that are being paid to stand around and do nothing until you get there. So I agree with that.
And just a reminder to everybody on the call, including newbies, we're informal here. So anytime we're on a topic, you want to jump in, ask a question, make a comment, please jump in, throw something in chat. You're always welcome to do so. And then finally, I'm good for a shameless plug or two. We're partnered with the Truck Parking Club, private organization nationwide that many of you have heard me talk about previously, and they have a very, very impressive growing list of thousands of private truck parking locations nationwide. They're safe, they're secure. Obviously, there is a fee involved, and they also do a great job of noting the several hundred of which are approved for OSOW. So keep them in mind as an option. All right. I almost hesitate to bring this one up, but we always talk state permitting news, and Tennessee seems to get picked on from time to time. So this is from a post in what I believe to be probably the most popular oversized, overweight Facebook site that's out there right now. It's called High, Wide, and Heavy. Some of you are familiar with it. They started out as pilot cars, but they've really expanded. And I guess I have two comments here on this post in Tennessee. One is, yes, somebody taking some shots at the Tennessee permit office again here, as you can see. But secondly, I always try to remind industry when they jump on these Facebook sites, whether they're just a driver or a permit official or a carrier themselves, state officials, and some of whom we have on this call, they monitor some of these sites. And I'm here to tell you, when you make comments on a popular Facebook OSOW site like this, and you take really personal cheap shots at the actual people within that permit office, as this gentleman does here, you're asking for trouble. Are the state permit office officials all professional? Yes, but they're human beings. And my goodness, everybody really needs to check themselves when they start commenting publicly, because this is your livelihood. These state officials, they hold your lives in their hands in terms of issuing your permits. But with that said, I do want to go back to the initial comment about Tennessee, and in a professional manner, just kind of ask everybody, if you would, are some of you continuing to see slightly longer than normal delays in Tennessee compared to other states in obtaining your permits? Anybody weigh in for me there?
I just had an empty 13 axle take 2.5 weeks to get a permit. And I mean, it was the thing with Tennessee that we face time and time again, of course, so we've talked about it at all meetings, is they're pretty good, when they're not backed up and when they're not busy. The second that they get inundated with permit applications, they just shut down. And that's a big problem with these permit lead times. Right before Christmas, I had two gen sets that were approved within a matter of 6 hours. And 2 weeks later had put in a permit for the empty side of it, and it took just about 2.5, 3 weeks to get the empty trailer permit for them.
Understood. Thank you, Charlie. So Daniel, let's get you and Raymond back engaged. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys, from your unique perspective, not only how do the two of you see the state of the state nationwide and statewide with obtaining permits, but part two of that question to you, I'm really curious to hear about, and I think folks on the call would be as well. Tell us about experiences you've had, best practices and worst practices in terms of you as a driver interacting with either your permits, your carrier district or such, in the whole world of obtaining permits and such. Daniel?
Well, as far as Tennessee goes, I have a good friend that works over at Miller. He's been waiting for 3.5 weeks for a 22 wide permit on 13 axles. So granted, I know their system's a little bit older. They're trying to modernize it. I think they just shut down again to try and work on modernizing it. But overall, other than Tennessee, the only state I've ever really had issues with is actually Texas, and that is their permits are way too detailed. Their routing permits go into every little, cross this road, then cross this road, then cross this road. It's like, you can tell me just go straight for 15 miles. You don't have to tell me every intersection I'm going through. Interesting
comment.
Yeah.
How about your best and worst practices of interacting with the home office?
So interacting with the home office, I've interacted with Iowa State once. Myself, when I was at Miller, we had 16 loads to go through from Wisconsin to Washington State. Iowa denied us on the third trip, and the Iowa State actually wanted to talk to me myself as the driver, because they thought we were trying to pull a fast one on them, because it was the same exact. They were cookie cutter buildings. I had a great discussion with them, but then they yelled at Miller over I really don't know what, and they wouldn't let us permit it through the state anymore. But my office worked with us phenomenally. We would go in and we talk to them about ways they wanted to route us, changing routes different times of the year, trying to take a different route. Even working with them through looking at turns when we were doing some of the bigger trailers, they would rely on us. Like I pulled a Highway Max 3 for a while. They would talk to me extensively about, do you think you can make this turn? Would you prefer this? Like, how would you lay it out? Even getting in. So I did a lot of the Faymanville trailers for them. So one of the things I was doing was I was running pilot loads for supporting the production or the building of a couple of the new aircraft carriers down in Newport News. So we actually made sure when we were doing the route surveys and routing that we had a stop off at it used to be the White's Travel Center in Raphine, Virginia, because it was the best place for us to stop with the oversized loads. So, they worked with me. They got worked with the state. We got routed in there for every trip, just as a good safe haven.
Yeah. So thank you, Dan. So Raymond, based on what I just heard from Daniel, would it be pretty obvious that a best practice that you would offer this group on this call when you're interacting with your home office, your carrier home office, is that good communication? And would it be safe to say that the mark of a good dispatcher is they know their drivers and they care about their drivers' thoughts in terms of routing that they want and prefer?
Yes, I would say we have a permit service company that we use ourselves. It's kind of it's a separate company, but kind of an extension, if you will. There's a good relationship there. And when we have to work those out, the dispatcher that controls those larger loads, like I was explaining, the overhead crane loads, she has a list of drivers that she'll use and because she knows that we know the areas, we know the equipment. They do a good job of making sure we have at least a full day ahead of time, at least one full day ahead of time to research those permits, to plan our routes, to know where we're going to stop. And if we run into issues, like I said, we do a lot of job sites, so there's multiple runs. And sometimes the route that we get the first time, we're like, this doesn't really work. And, we're able to work out a solution that is better suited for the load. So, yeah, I would say we do a good job with that.
Raymond, this is a story we've been following on the Roundtable, sadly, for the last couple of weeks. Tragic fatality in North Dakota involving an oversized load, as best as I can tell. An 88-year-old man in a passenger vehicle was coming one direction, the oversized load wide, with his pilots in tow coming the other direction. And the oversized load, as best I can tell, was doing everything proper, staying in their lane, and the passenger vehicle kind of was crowding the center line a little bit, and he ended up striking the load, then striking a pilot car, and the driver fatality, sadly enough. No one else in the OSOW convoy injured. But take a minute, Raymond, you first, and then you, Daniel, and just talk about, from your perspective, what a dangerous job you folks have and the responsibilities you have.
Yeah, depending on the size of the load, when we get into these super mega loads, the public is just unaware of how to react around us. They think that if they, whip around us real quick and get out of our way, that they're doing us a favor, and they really don't. They get nervous, they get scared. And then you always have the impatient people who feel a little more entitled that, pull the silly things they really shouldn't do. It's really a shame that there's not more awareness out there to the public about how to act around us and what to do. Most of the time, if they would just give us more space, it would a lot better. We are under so many requirements to flag and light, I'm not adverse to the situation you guys, but based on what you said, doing everything right, we could have every light, every banner, every flag out there. But unfortunately, if the other party isn't paying attention, that's when unfortunate events happen. And a lot of times, and I'm sure you've witnessed this yourself in your personal vehicle, is the cell phone has become a huge distraction. And, they'll be so focused on that, what they're doing, that by the time they come up, whether it's, they panic at that last second, and that's when unfortunate events occur.
Yeah, Daniel, when I first came across this story a couple of weeks ago, I thought it was more of the traditional type of incident that occurs when passenger vehicles and oversized loads are coming together. And that is the incident we've seen far too often where, to Raymond's point, they're distracted or they're in too much of a hurry and they attempt to pass the oversized load convoy. Why don't you take this question that direction? Because we've seen that tragedy happen far too often. Why does that occur, and what could possibly be done to prevent those incidents?
I think a lot of it falls on educating the public. People don't realize, they see us running down the road, they don't realize, the driver is reliant a lot of times solely on whatever his rear escort tells him. And we might not be able to see around the load. They also don't realize how long we actually are. It's one thing to say, you're 140 foot long, but then when you actually pull out to pass a vehicle that long, that's a whole different ballgame of looking down the road further. The other thing is, people do not, in cars, most people driving a car don't understand how soft the shoulder of a road is. So they expect us to move over, and we might not be able to because we can see the shoulder is too soft. Then they try and move over onto the shoulder and they'll lose control. I had that happen. He never touched my load. I had a building out of Minnesota right after I started with Miller Transfer. I was on a side road in Illinois. Guy tried to pass me he actually wanted to go around me on the right because it had a wider shoulder. And as soon as he hit the gravel, his tires started sinking in, and he spun the car off into the field. He was okay, but it's like, now if I would have stopped, he would have yelled at me, and then it would have been a whole big thing. Well, you caused this. Like, well, I can't go fast. Like, I have to be careful with what I'm doing, and I can't move over. Like, just give us a minute. We pull off whenever we can, as soon as it's safe, but we can't just pull onto the shoulder because we will sink. We will roll the truck over. We will get stuck.
Let me bring John Moore, our buddy from Precision Specialized, into the call. Are you with us, John?
Yeah. Hey, good day, Stephen.
Yeah. I want you to comment briefly, and we're going to have you back in a couple weeks for some reason, my browser's not working properly here. We'll bring you back in a couple weeks to talk more about this, but I just want you to briefly set up. This was really cool. You and Ed and Precision featured in Breakbulk News. Just briefly, what were you doing here, and what is it that may come as a result of this move?
Yeah, it was a pretty neat move. We had a bunch of carbon capture units that we moved up out of Texas up to Saskatchewan, Canada, and so there was a heavy load that was on our P9 Goldhofer trailer that's on that picture. That one wasn't too bad. It was just a heavy, oversized, overweight load. But we did have a couple lightweight tandem mini deck loads, and that's where the big issues came from that we had to really pay attention to on our routing. So the mini deck trailers run typically 3.5 to 4 inch ground clearance. So they had a 20,000 pound load on them, but they were 18 feet tall loaded. They were loaded in a way that we were able to reduce the height of the load. The load itself originally was 18 foot tall. We had a client fabricated up some custom saddles, which created a 6.5-foot rear overhang going on an angle out the back of the trailer, and it was only 2 feet off the ground. But the 3-inch ground clearance was one thing we've had to pay a lot of attention to, as everybody knows in this industry, is rail tracks and railroad crossings, especially in Texas. There is a lot of high point rail crossings. So it wasn't just a matter of getting a permit, but it was a matter of getting a route. And we looked at a lot of routes that we've used in the past that just would not work for the mini deck trailers because of the rail crossings. So we had a lot of boots in the ground, a lot of surveys done really quickly, and we relied heavy on a lot of local surveyors in each state to get it on up through. And we did find a good route. And what it prompted when we had identified this issue when we first got into this project is our company, we rewrote an SOP on rail crossings for our company. So I spent quite a bit of time. Stephen, actually, I talked to you, reached out back before Christmas about it, just trying to gather up some information. So I spoke to a few different people in our industry, from trucking companies to truck drivers and to pilot cars, just trying to get some of the best practices, if you will, onto that. So we put an SOP together. We did some training with the drivers about rail crossings, what to do, worst case scenarios. If we get into a situation, there was a lot of caution and emphasis was put onto the rail crossings. We had about 8 rail crossings that were identified as a potential hazard. Where we had to stop, lift, do some calls. So that was all identified ahead of time, documented in tailgate meetings. And we also outfitted our trucks and trailers with air ride override valves, just because the mini deck trailers we had were not hydraulic trailers. So we did not have a big lift capacity. So as most drivers would know, if you've got a mini deck with a 4-inch ground clearance and you don't have a hydraulic neck, the only saving grace you have is air ride override, which gives you an additional 4 inches, is what we found with that. So it is a interesting project.
Thank you, John. And we're going to keep talking about the railroad situation that we've been talking about for years, and hope for improvement there. And I know Chris Smith at SCNR. Yep.
Yeah, I just want to jump in, Isaac Height, your route survey guy. Please make sure, everybody, that your route surveyors are taking pictures of the railroad tracks, measuring the hump if necessary, if it's necessary to the load, and taking a picture of the emergency sign, so that in the route survey they already have a picture of the number to call and the crossing number. That's good information to have handy. You don't want to have to wait and get out, go look.
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. And we're going to talk. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there quick. Isaac hit the nail on the head right there. So when we had our surveyors out in physical surveys, that was one thing I requested, was pictures of every rail crossing and documentation on a rail crossing number and emergency contact numbers. So we had that documented well before the loads even got loaded. That's very crucial.
We're going to talk rail again in the coming weeks, as we have previously. And I know Chris at SCNRA, they're working hard, continuing to work hard on this issue as well. And speaking of SCNRA, again, plug for the symposium coming up. Probably still not too late to sign up for that. Look forward to seeing you all. Okay, Daniel and Raymond, back to you. We'll close out on this topic, and that is, my goodness, this topic has come up so often over the years, and confusion and such, and that is, what can and cannot pilots legally do from state to state with regards to stopping traffic? Everyone's heard me talk about bridge slowdown provisions. Boy, you want to bring up a topic, Daniel and Raymond, that neither state officials publicly want to talk about and carriers want to talk about, and that is these bridge slowdown provisions. But anyway, your quick comments. We'll start with you, Daniel, on this very difficult topic of what can and should pilots do from state to state. Mm-hmm.
So for me, several states say pilot cars cannot control traffic, but it flat out, the bigger you go, the more you rely on them controlling traffic, because people will do the stupidest things. And the states need to get more reform on that. I don't know if it's coming up with a set training standard for all the pilot cars, but there needs to be a standard. And for bridge slowdown, I had one pilot car driver. He's actually the son of a driver at Miller that retired. He actually had a signboard that he could put a message on the back of his car. And that worked the best for bridge slowdowns to let traffic know what's going on. But in general, I would slow down as much as I can. But if I was on an interstate, 70-mile-an-hour interstate, and the state chose to tell me to slow to 15 for a bridge, I'm not risking my pilot car getting turned into a soda can behind the back of my trailer. We'll slow down to 35 or 40, but I'm not going to 15.
And Daniel, you have just nailed that awkwardness that I was describing earlier, that the states and the bridge offices, including mine in Illinois when I was there, would say, Stephen, we don't have to put this bridge slowdown provision, but that's going to mean that your carriers, your permit customers, are going to go hundreds of miles out of their way. And so we're kind of at this instance where, and I hate to predict bad news, but I just have this strange, morbid sense, Raymond, let's bring you into this conversation, that God forbid one day we're going to have a bridge slowdown provision where perhaps someone like Daniel does follow the letter of the permit provision, and it ends up causing a cataclysmic, fatality or two. Raymond, your thoughts?
Well, I've had a few instances where I've had to do that, and one of them was over not a suspended bridge, and then the other ones were over a steel bridge that we were crossing between Arkansas and the Mississippi. And it makes it really difficult. People are impatient. They're more concerned about their agenda than what we have to do, and I, as much as I'm ashamed to admit it, I've kind of followed some of Daniel's position as well. But we also tried in an effort to reach out to the locals to see if they could help us, the local police authority, to say, can you help us with the traffic so that we can cross this bridge at the speeds you guys want? Because we were overweight and we're trying not to shake the bridge any more than necessary. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. Judith?
Can I add two quick things?
Yeah, real quick.
This? Okay, so one is I did several night moves into Baltimore. Baltimore City quit giving us any assistance. They would leave one sheriff to escort us into Baltimore from the north side down 95. That's, I think, 7 lanes of traffic. And they wanted us at 5 miles per hour for 11 straight bridges before we got off to the port. And then the other one, and that sheriff, every time he would escort us in, it was the same sheriff usually. He would always tell us the same thing. You just go along at whatever speed you feel safe at, but I'm not going to let myself get rear-ended. He said, if you want to do 45, go for it. They won't give us any help. I'm not going to be out here risking my life. The other one is Ohio. One time, they're supposed to have a escort for a bridge, a police escort. The officer failed to show, and my rear escort and I still slowed for the 2 bridges we had to crawl, and we wound up getting pulled into the scale because we didn't have a police officer with us, and we impeded traffic. Now the state wound up, at the end of it, the state admitted fault because the officer saw us and chose not to pull out and escort us. With the load I had, I could not sit on a shoulder. And where we were supposed to pick him up was the last place we could have met him before we got to the 2 bridges. But that was the 2 times that I've had issues with bridge escort things that it just, we had to deal with it.
My head is nodding as you're telling those stories, Daniel, and I'm sure a lot of folks on this call as well. Judith, our good friend from the Indiana Permit Office, your quick comment, and then I want to introduce our special guest, John Newberry.
Yeah, I was just wondering, from industry side, I know Indiana, we require police escorts on our slowdown permits. Is that not a common practice amongst the other states?
It is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha. Okay, Daniel and Raymond, stay with us, and everybody, real quick. We're not transitioning formally yet, and I promise we won't get religious on y'all until we make the actual transition. But I want to introduce to the whole group before we lose everybody. Pastor John Newberry, who David Lowery talked about a couple of weeks ago, is the chaplain for the Bennett family of companies, and John does a daily or weekly devotional and many other outreaches and counseling with all the Bennett drivers and such. And John, just want you to quickly introduce yourself and give everybody in general on this call, before we lose some folks, some of your thoughtful advice and experiences of these OSOW drivers out on the road.
Well, I thank you guys so much for what y'all do. I do a lot for Bennett simply because of the fact that we have a good relationship. I grew up with some of Miss Taylor's, with two of her kids, and we just have a good relationship, a good rapport. What I do here at the Bennett family of companies, I just do mainly devotional. I handle stuff such as if somebody has a funeral and they don't have a pastor, I normally do it for them. If somebody's getting married and they don't have a pastor, I do that for them. I'm basically like an in-house pastor for all the staff as well as our drivers. So a lot of our drivers that we have here, they call me in reference to some stuff that they may be dealing with or going through. So I try and make sure that we meet all their spiritual needs. I don't get involved in what you guys are doing right now. I just get more involved in the aspect of their spiritual, because that's one of our core values, is our spiritual commitment. So I try to make sure that we honor our spiritual commitment here as a family. I'm a married man, been married for almost 40 years this October. And my wife is the happiest woman in the world because she's married to me. I can say that because she's not on this call. Yeah. And we have 2 children. I got a son that's a paramedic, a daughter that's she's autistic and she runs the house. So it's just, I'm a simple guy. I try to make life easy for people. I try to make sure that they enjoy this great thing that God has blessed us with, that is called life.
One more general question, John, before we transition here, and that is, a lot of mid to upper level management folks from the specialized transportation industry on this call here. What one thing could you share with them from your experiences with the drivers, the OSOW drivers around the country, that you'd most like the management folks on this call to know about the drivers and be sensitive to their jobs and their dangerous roles?
Patience, really, it's all about patience, because a lot of our drivers out there on the road are going through something, and whether you know it or not, we in this industry, so we know a lot of drivers won't tell you when they're hurting. They won't tell you when they're going through something. They're dealing with life. They're not going to tell you, because in their eyesight, if they tell you that they're hurting, they're going through stuff, then it makes them look weak. And so what I've found in my little short time is that most of the guys that are going through stuff, I have to pull it out of them. I have to say, hey, look, I know you didn't get the load that you was anticipating, or you didn't get the financial piece from it that you was anticipating. And you just have to be real patient with them, because we have to remember that this is something I think we have to make sure we're conscious of. We have to remember they are behind the wheel carrying a load that's helping us make money. So we've got to make sure that we're patient enough to help them to be able to navigate to where they're trying to go. But at the same time, make sure that they understand that they are important to you. They have to know that they are important to you, because that, I think, is one of the biggest problems that I hear drivers jumping from company to company, is because they don't feel like they have any value where they are. So we have to make sure that they know they are valued. So that's the challenge. And being in management, I'm gonna tell you, being in management, some managers and some leaders are not very compassionate. It's all about the dollar with them, when they keep forgetting that they wouldn't have those dollars if it weren't for those drivers.
That is so deep, John. And I want to bring Raymond and Daniel back in one last time here to comment on that. And I'm reminded, Daniel and Raymond, and a lot of good folks on this call do this, but our good friend Pete Trimble from Keene used to tell me, I observed it when I was on site there, when I was at SCNRA. He was their director of safety, VP. He would make a conscious effort, Daniel and Raymond, to John's point. When they would come in off the road, he would go out, he would meet them, he'd talk to them, try to provide them opportunities to, just share what's going on and what's really on their mind. Just last quick question, Daniel and Raymond, how important is that with the carrier that you're working with to have that kind of relationship John talked about?
So that, for me, that's critically important. Being able to have a boss that'll actually come out and talk with you, that will meet you. I'm reminded, so my background, I actually came up, my mom drove for Creek Carrier, Schaefer Trucking, very large privately owned company. The man that started it, Dwayne Ackley, he was well known for the fact he would go to terminals and sit in the driver's lounge. And all he would do is he'd sit in the driver's lounge. He'd listen to his drivers, wearing a pair of coveralls. Sometimes they'd be old and dirty, and it helped him to understand what was going on with the company. And that meant that he took care of those drivers in a way that it led to, despite them being fouled to the trucks, they kept drivers longer than a lot of companies would probably ever think they could keep a driver for.
That is right. That is right to the pastor's point you just made there. Thank you, Daniel.
I think they just had one of their drivers retire with like 53 years with the company, or 52 years with the company. It's like you don't see that in trucking very often.
Thank you, Daniel. And we'll close with you, Raymond, and I'll pose the question differently to you, to the pastor's point, and that is, drivers they're proud men and women, they're private men and women, and oftentimes you guys as drivers, Raymond, aren't prone to just share it all, right, in that first experience.
That is correct. I'm given the opportunity to move some of this equipment and these pieces around the country, and it makes me feel straighter in my seat, knowing that the staff has the faith and confidence in me, knowing that I will do a good job from start to finish and see it through. I've had opportunities where I've delivered to a job site, and I'm sure Daniel can attest to this too. Sometimes your dispatchers think, oh, you got to the job site, you're going to deliver this thing, and oh, hey, we got this next load for you, you got to go. And they don't realize that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you sit for a few days while that job site has to, finish preparing for whatever you're bringing them. And in this particular experience, I was at a job site, and we had to sit for 3 days while they moved some things around. They had a lot of rain, so they had to prepare the ground better. And actually had one of the higher representatives for this company reach out to our owner, Aaron Peterson, and call and say he was really thankful that we were respectful, we were patient, we didn't throw up a fuss, we were accommodating. And once he received that information, Aaron went ahead and sent us as drivers a little care package to say thank you, and that does go a long way for us, because a lot of the times, as Daniel can attest to, these moves are extremely stressful, and it's not necessarily the move itself and moving the equipment. It's dealing with the other factors outside of our control around us. Mostly other drivers, sometimes weather, sometimes, you come up to, I know I've come up to a bridge that, there was no way I was going to fit under based on the sign, but, you have to stop, you measure it, and you find out, okay, that sign is wrong, but you don't want to find out the hard way, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Raymond. My apologies. We've got a transition here. But Raymond and Daniel, thank you. We're going to have you guys back. Rob and Julie, if you're on the call. Andy Freeman couldn't join us today, but you know how highly I think of him as an OSOW driver. So encourage him to reach back out to me. I want to have him back on as well.